There's a gentleman named Mehdi Hassan. Got a show on MSNBC. I think it's a horse race between Mehdi and Chris Hayes for who's got the best cable news presence. Ali Velshi is somewhere in there as well. But what I like so much about Mehdi Hassan is he breaks down tangible things, like actionable things, and when you get something like the debate over the debt ceiling, where one side says X and one side says Y, he will often do something like he showed on his show yesterday, which is a debate between two learned people who are going to present reasonable arguments, or at least the best arguments they can, for either topic, or rather either position. I would like us to look at this, and I have a slightly different interpretation. I have a different prescription that I recommend we suggest to our representatives that they pursue. But let's look at the debate, and you can hear the best arguments I've seen so far for just going around the non-functioning MAGA hostage takers in Congress. Here's Mehdi Hassan.
I'm no lawyer, so let's talk to some folks who are. Joining me now for an actual debate are two of the country's top legal and constitutional minds who have competing New York Times op-eds on this topic. Lawrence Tribe is a constitutional law emeritus professor at Harvard Law School, co-author of To End a Presidency, The Power of Impeachment. He has advised multiple Democratic presidents on constitutional issues, and last week, when Joe Biden was discussing the possible use of the 14th Amendment, he name-checked Professor Tribe. In a recent New York Times essay, he writes, Mr. Biden must tell Congress in no uncertain terms and as soon as possible, before it's too late to avert a financial crisis, that the United States will pay all its bills as they come due. On the other side of the debate, Michael W. McConnell is a professor at Stanford Law, as well as the director for the school's Constitutional Law Center. He's also a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution and a former judge for the 10th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals. His New York Times op-ed on the 14th Amendment is headlined, "The Case for Violating the Debt Limit is Dangerous Nonsense." Thank you both for joining me today. I appreciate you being here. Michael, let me start with you. You heard me make the case for using the 14th Amendment, but I'm no lawyer, although I did mention a bunch of legal experts who say the 14th Amendment is a real and viable option for avoiding a default. You, however, called it, quote, dangerous nonsense and an illegal, foolish idea. Briefly explain for our viewers why you are so against it.
Well, yes, you made a political case, but you made no legal case at all. And I think the law here is absolutely clear. The President of the United States does not have the power to borrow additional money on the
Yeah. We're in fact, I'll even go back a little. He says president doesn't have the ability. I want to highlight one very important thing at the beginning here, and we're going to come back to it at the end because everything rests on that. Two words. I think, he says. We're going to come back to it.
No legal case at all. And I think the law here is absolutely clear. The President of the United States does not have the power to borrow additional money on the credit of the United States without authorization from Congress. That is bedrock constitutional law. It comes from Article 1, Section 8, Clause 2. And the 14th Amendment has nothing whatever to do with this. The 14th Amendment does not mention the president. It does not authorize the president to do anything. And indeed, the 14th Amendment, Section 4, really has nothing to do with a debt limit crisis. What it provides is that the public debt of the United States the validity of the public debt may not be questioned. Well, even if we come to default, which I think is highly unlikely because I assume the actors here are going to negotiate a reasonable deal, but even if we did default, this would not this would not question the validity of the public debt. When a borrower doesn't pay on time, the debt is just as valid as before. It just means that the debtor is in trouble.
So, Larry, you're peddling an illegal, dangerous, nonsensical idea, says Michael. He says it's a political argument, not a legal argument. What is your response to him?
Well, with all respect, I think Michael is completely wrong. Section 4.
Again, I just want to underline this because we are going to come back to it. What's the other guy say? Lawrence Tribe? I think. Two of the most learned men that could be called to talk about this. I think and I think. These are opinions. We're going to come back to it.
The 14th Amendment was inserted when Abraham Lincoln realized that just as we need to completely raise lots of money beyond, and he had to expand the debt of the United States 80-fold in order to put down the insurrection. After the insurrection was put down, the same forces threatened to destroy the country from within by making it difficult for us to pay our debts. So the Constitution in Section 4 of the 14th Amendment made it clear that we would always pay our debts. Of course, the president doesn't have unilateral power to borrow. No one said he did.
Isn't it interesting that Republicans, conservatives, let's call them what they are by their lineage, their philosophical lineage. Conservatives are once again falling back on a playbook that they used in the Civil War. We're going towards the Civil War era in reverse. We're backing up into it. Because, conservatives are weak. They lost the war. They got their butts whipped by the good old boys in the Union. So what did they do? They tried to skip out on bills. That's what they tried to do. They tried to be bums. They tapped into their true selves, and they tried to be a bunch of debt-skipping bums. And they tried to make the rest of us as low and loathsome as they are, as a way to take the country hostage. So it's not a surprise to see, once again, conservatives, or rather the people that have taken over the Conservative Party, insurrectionists, are once again following that playbook. Very interesting. And not a surprise. I would assume that they are doing this intentionally. I think they look at the traitors to our country throughout history and say, "Oh, how can we be more like them?"
Federal power to borrow. No one said he did. But Congress has given him that power every time it passes a budget under something that Michael doesn't seem to be talking about, under the 1974 Congressional Budget Act, which was designed to prevent Nixon from refusing to spend money that Congress had told him to spend. Every time a budget is passed, it automatically sets both a floor and a ceiling. After 1974, the arbitrary ceiling that was set in 1917 really doesn't get in the way at all. There's a separate freestanding set of sections of 31 U.S. Code, Title 31, which affirmatively authorize the president to borrow money through the Treasury Department to make up the gap between the amount Congress has agreed to tax and the amount it has said he must spend. Those sections, 3102 through 3106, are in full effect. The other provision, which is a freestanding provision in section 3101 of Title 31, gets in the way, but it is a completely unconstitutional obstacle because it would make us basically deadbeats. It would make the president exercise what the Supreme Court has said he can't be given as a matter of separation of powers, and that is a line item veto. He'd have to decide which debts we pay, which debts we don't. Is he going to stiff the veterans or the Social Security recipients? That is a seizure by the president of the power of the purse. So I think Michael has absolutely every part of the argument wrong. And I think I'm being a lawyer here. That's what I've done for 50 years. And I think Michael has just missed the boat completely.
Michael, deal with the arguments Larry raised there, especially the line item veto point, the idea that it's unconstitutional for a president to be picking and choosing as we become deadbeats.
So when Congress has decided to spend more money than the revenues come in, they can authorize borrowing up, and they do, up to a certain a level, but not infinite, up to a certain level, and we've reached that. If you then reach that point, the president has the obligation, I think the constitutional obligation, but certainly a responsible obligation, which every president has recognized, to prioritize spending. That's what Secretary Yellen has been doing for the last several months, is to prioritize spending. And the very statute that Professor Tribe mentions, the Impoundment Control Act of 1974, authorizes the president to defer spending through the end of the fiscal year in the case of contingencies, which obviously this is as big a contingency as you can possibly imagine.
Out of curiosity, and I'll check the comments at the conclusion of this, but out of curiosity, does anybody else follow this right now? I think I've watched this 2 or 3 times, and I think after time number 2, I got a pretty good understanding of both of their arguments. But I'm curious, honestly, don't feel embarrassed here. Do you follow the arguments they're making right now? My summary of it so far is Tribe saying the 14th Amendment can absolutely be used to pay the existing debt because the people who decided that we have the debt let go of their authority to deal with it once they decided we have it. It's not a matter of whether or not we'll pay it. Their decision-making ability is tied to when they said we would pay it. Rather, when they said we would take it out. It's non-negotiable, in other words, and that the president would be given undue authority by then having to decide who we will pay of that limited group that will actually pay back. The other guy's saying, no. President would be given undue authority to pay the debt that we acquired under Trump. We're going to keep it going for a moment, but I want to be clear. The nuance here is poison to Democrats. It's absolute poison. Because I promise you, the other side does not look at it like this. The other side, the people that are holding the country hostage, they're not sitting here being like, oh, what's ethical? What's within the rights of the country? No, they're asking, what can we get away with? All of the things they say, all of their reasoning they put out, it's not actual reasoning that they have. It's just the excuse they've decided on. That's all Republican talking points are. They're just a series of excuses to rob the country, to take away your vote, to harass trans people, to attack homosexuals, to make black people terrified to walk outside. It's all just excuses to act like see you next Tuesdays. So when we're sitting here looking at these two talking about nuance back and forth, just remember the other side does not care at all. We're gonna conclude it in a moment.
And to send a message to Congress to that effect. But in the meantime, the real answer here is that he should negotiate with Congress. Congress has the power of the purse. All this nonsense about hostage taking is ridiculous, since the Congress is the branch of government that has authority for all of this. It is all within its control, and President Biden can veto, and he has political authority. But at this point, the only responsible thing is for him to sit down and negotiate and a set of spending cuts that'll be acceptable to both sides. We aren't facing a crisis. We're just facing a political problem.
Except it is hostage taking. I mean, it is. Whether or not we are going to pay the debts that Donald Trump racked up and his administration racked up was not in question until Republicans decided that they could refuse to do their duty in order to get undue political power. If they wanted to get the cuts to the budget, which would be, hacking apart your Social Security, defunding anything decent the American government does, and giving all the benefits, all the saved money, it really wouldn't be benefits, but all the saved money from that to billionaires. If they wanted to do that, the way to go about it would be to get a majority in the House and Senate. That's the correct way to dismantle the country, if that is what they want to go through with. Clearly it is. Remember what they said. Those two very learned people. I think. My thought, my theory, my interpretation of the laws. Okay. Let's take a page from the Republican playbook. Let's all contact Dark Brandon and say, just do the damn thing. Just do it. Use the 14th Amendment. Give your reasoning in line with what Lawrence Tribe said. And you know what? If Republicans want to cry and holler about it, let them. They want to push it all the way to the Supreme Court and let the Supreme Court debate it. Let them. Make them, in fact, take that responsibility on. Pay the debt now, immediately. Just pay it. And then let's have a debate about what we should have done, what would have been right, after we've already paid the debt. That's the way to deal with these folks. I had a coach back in the day. I did a kind of wrestling where you wear a I don't know how to describe it. Like a thick wool jacket as you're wrestling, and you're allowed to grab that wool jacket. In fact, that's part of it. But you're not allowed to hit anybody. But sometimes when you grab it, you do accidentally. You get a little knock in there. And I was wrestling with in a tournament with a kid, because I was a kid, that was throwing elbows when they were grabbing my jacket and they were turning their arm. Just coincidentally, their elbow kept going in my face. It's lumpy enough as is. And I looked. I was furious, and I eked my way through that match. I looked over at my coach, and he knew exactly what I was thinking. And he said, if the ref isn't calling elbows, in other words, elbow the son of a bitch. If the ref isn't calling elbows, elbow the son of a bitch. If Republicans are going to play by a different set of rules, rather than whining about the fact that they don't play by the rules they should be, we should beat them by not holding ourselves arbitrarily to those rules. if they're going to take the debt ceiling and be clowns with it, then just ignore them. Straight up ignore them. The thing for Biden to do is to use the 14th Amendment. Whether or not he truly believes what Lawrence Tribe says doesn't matter. Use it. And we can go back to having these nuanced, detailed conversations about what would be right, the way things ought to be done, yada, 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 when we are talking with people that are worth talking to. But right now, we're talking with a bunch of insurrectionist traitors. We're talking with a bunch of dishonest, racist scum. Treat them as such. And as the American people, we need to insist that the party that is in opposition to these to this scum act appropriately. We don't need to have all this stress right now. The stress is the point. They're trying to make it seem like the Biden administration is every bit as chaotic as the Trump administration to people who only pay attention a little bit. That's who they're going for. People who only kind of pay attention and also are bad human beings. That's their target with all this nonsense. So don't give them what they want. Don't give them the chaos. Don't give them the negotiating because they're going to negotiate in bad faith. Instead, the thing to do, just pay the damn debt. Pay it off. And then let them, in retrospect, say what ought to have been done. If the ref ain't calling elbows, use the damn elbows.